Money. 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 Oh! Money!
On the 12th of September 2022, SSO announced that they will be raising their prices for both Star Rider and Star Coins by 10% starting on the 26th of September of the same year. They did promise a few promotions and discounts before the 26th to make a little up for it, but you can imagine the backlash at this point in time. People are unhappy that a game that is already by industry standards overly expensive is now pushing up its prices further. But what is going on? Should they be pushing up their prices, and do they have a right to? But before we get into all of that, I'd just like to take a moment to thank all my coffee supporters for supporting this channel. If you want to be a supporter, please click on the link in the description below and just buy me a coffee. Furthermore, if my ideas don't align with yours, I'd love to hear why. Just drop a comment below and let me know what you think about this whole situation. And with that, let's get into it. In the article, SSO cites the reason for this sudden increase is due to the global economic crisis, and they also remind us that they have not raised the prices since 2016. This is actually true. SSO has not raised the prices in over 6 years and have remained stable for the entirety of that time. But we do need to ask why. The argument is that SSO had always been extremely expensive, which is why they didn't need to raise the prices in 6 years. The price essentially negated inflation, but I'll get into the economic little stuff in a little bit. Suffice it to say for now, this is one of the most expensive games currently on the market, especially when we compare what you get for the same price in other games. I give you Black Desert Online, which I bought for $1. The fact of the matter is, SSO has never really earned its $60 or $70 or now $80 price tag. It is a collector game, essentially, which is fine in of itself, but on top of the base game price, you still need to plop down extra money every month to essentially complete your collection. Now, it'd be like if you buy the game Pokemon and you had to buy a new Pokemon with real money. You can't catch them in the wild anymore. You have to purchase them every month. This is essentially why people don't feel it actually deserves its price tag. When we get into the actual gameplay, which is non-existent, at least with Pokemon we have actual gameplay, it gets a little worse. And we can clearly see that SSO, despite having an above industry price tags, it's just not up to industry standards, especially when we have games like Elden Ring, Skyrim, and Red Dead Redemption 2 and other heavy titles coming out every year. Now, we can always make the excuse that SSO is a small company with around 200 people compared to Red Dead Redemption 2, who had over 1,500 people working on it, but Minecraft was a couple of people. No Man's Sky was only a couple of dozen people. There are a lot of games that have small development teams that can do great games. SSO really has no excuse. So then we need to ask ourselves the question, as they hike up the prices and they make millions every year, when do we stop using the excuse of small company and expect them to do better? Apparently it's when they push the prices too high, because that is exactly what players are demanding now, that the price tag reflect the quality of the game. Now, here I would like to take a moment and say that yes, SSO has been doing a little better. They've been adding more events, there's been a little bit more quests, and I do feel like they've been trying. If they keep it up in a few years, it could be up to the standard of a big game, but that is extremely difficult to predict. The fact is, people were willing to pay $70 for this game when it was not doing good and they were bringing out terrible updates every week. People were still willing to pay that price tag. So the sad fact is, the reason they've been able to get away with this high price tag is simple: because people are willing to pay. It's a supply and demand situation. There is a demand for open world horse games. There are very few open world horse games on the caliber of SSO, and so they can essentially hike up the prices into oblivion because people would pay just to play it. In short, if there were other games on the market as competition, they would most likely have to drop the prices a long time back. But there is a sort of method to the madness of raising an already overpriced game in the current day and age. Getting back to the inflation, as I said before, the reason why they never upped the prices for 6 years was because their prices simply negated yearly inflation. We're about to get economical, stay with me. For those of you who might not know, inflation is essentially when money becomes worth less and less every year due to the increased prices for basic production costs, like the production for petrol and diesel. A global economic crisis will exacerbate this and could even result in hyperinflation, where prices of certain items will jump to around 200% of their original value in a few short months. To give you some context, the average inflation is usually anywhere to between 1 to 3% per year. Because there is a current global economic crisis, a lot of companies are trying to find ways to combat this problem. SSO most likely upped their own prices to combat the looming threat of global hyperinflation, which is being caused by the war in Europe. The global crisis is affecting everyone, and no one can get away from it. We are all being affected by it. I'm currently paying 150% more for a bottle of cooking oil than I did at the start of the year. I thought it was 200%, but I'm absolutely horrible at math. Which means, considering the current situation, SSO is absolutely in their right to up their prices. I doubt this opinion is going to resonate with a lot of my followers, but that's just the way it is in the current state of the world. SSO upping their prices is not unfair, nor is it cruel, especially in a time like this. It is part of the reality of inflation, a part of keeping a business afloat during hard times, and with the current global crisis, it's really no surprise that they did this, and Sweden is in trouble. In an article, Tough Times Ahead for Sweden's Economy, it says, and I quote, "High inflation and rising interest rates impact household purchasing power, and thus private consumption will slow substantially both this year and next." Private consumption, as I understand it, includes things like food, clothing and leisure, which will include games. They are facing a slowed economic growth in the second half of the year, and when is SSO putting its prices up? In the second half of the year. It all lines up. They are trying to keep their business going throughout a crisis and be able to pay their salaries throughout a crisis. Most likely, SSO is trying to tap into countries outside of Sweden who are still strong and able to pay and willing to pay a higher price for their product. In short, they are gathering nuts for winter. But as we see the noose tighten around the neck of the world economy, prices for games will most likely begin to fall as more people start to use their little money they have to buy food and other necessities instead of spending it on leisure, like pixelated horses. I'm curious to see if SSO has possibly pushed their game past the accessible threshold though. All products have a threshold. No matter how good your product is, there is always a realistic sum people will be willing to pay for it. Go too far over it during a possible economic crisis on top of that, people won't necessarily buy it. I'm curious to see if SSO has possibly gone over that threshold, but only time will tell. But due to all of this, I do find it rather strange and a little funny that people demand that SSO give them more bang for their buck by giving them a higher star coin allowance to make up for the raised prices. That is simply not how it works. If sudden and sharp inflation occurs in the world and your milk price goes up by 50%, you can't go ask the grocery store for the extra 50% milk to balance out the value you paid. As this wonderful person said, you can't combat inflation with inflation. The other demand is they want SSO to now make a better game to ensure the new price corresponds with the value of the game offers. Now, I'm all for a better game, and SSO has promised in the article to do better. It's been a bit of a hit and a miss this year. On the one hand, they are pushing out more quests, finishing up old stories, they added the camera mode, they did try to fix the cheat problem, albeit with disastrous results, and yeah, in some ways they are listening. On the other hand, the gutting of XP did not endear them to the fanbase. The changing of old characters did not endear them to the fanbase. It's like I said, a hit and a miss. They're trying, but it's going to take time for them to get the ball rolling in a more effective way. The problem now is, though, a lot of players will say that SSO should have done this a long time ago. Now, yes, I do agree. Earlier will always be better. But by saying this, we're putting SSO in the position that nothing they will do will ever be right because they didn't do it earlier. It's like with an alcoholic. When the alcoholic finally quits drinking, we should be happy that he's taking a step forward, not angry that he didn't start 5 years ago. Everyone has to start somewhere, and shooting SSO down the whole time does not really give them a chance to grow. It's like the quote I used from my We Hear Your Concerns video: a horse learns through applying pressure. You keep up the pressure until the horse does what you want, and then here's the key part: you release the pressure when it did it right. If you never release the pressure, how is the horse ever going to know that it did anything right? Now, I also want to make it clear, you should be critical and always be willing to speak up if something is wrong. Without those interactions, games can't grow either. And it is due to our willingness to speak up that SSO is now doing better in a lot of respects. But at the same time, be willing to admit when a company just does something right. If we don't, then our criticism has absolutely no credibility. But in closing, I don't have a problem with SSO raising the prices. I'm probably going to get lynched for this, but it's fine. I'll go grab my armor. We're staring a global economic crash in the face. And when that happens, everyone is going to reprioritize what is important. And it is possible that in the future, SSO will have to drop its prices so low just to get people with no money to buy it because no one can afford it. Well, damn, you know what? I really hope I don't have to do that video anytime soon.